Welcome, everyone. My name's Todd Butler. I have the honor of serving as the president and CEO of Causewave Community Partners, and I want to welcome you to tonight's live webcast as part of our series on race and media in our community. Just by way of background, in 2015, Causewave began a community conversation about race and media focused on local news in Rochester, New York. 3 years later, we presented the first local study that confirmed with data what many suspected, that there was a profound difference in perceptions along lines of race. And the experience of journalists who are people of color varied a great deal from their white colleagues as well. Then 2020 happened, and with the latest racial awakening came even greater skepticism of the way local news presented issues of race. But one thing has been consistent, that local news would be better able to build trust and find and tell stories of life in all communities, not just their problems, if they were more authentically connected to those communities, which brings us to tonight's topic of authentic community engagement. Thanks very much to our speakers tonight, people who have had experiences here and in communities across the country, and they're going to share those experiences with us this evening. In just a moment, I'll introduce our interviewer, our moderator tonight, Norma Holland, and she will introduce each of our panelists who will share some brief remarks, and then Norma will have a series of questions. And we hope that you'll have some questions as well. And that's one thing I wanted to make sure that you are aware is that we have reserved time at the end for questions, but please use the Q&A section to send us your questions as you think of them. If you put them in the chat, we may not see them. So the Q&A section will allow us to make sure that we don't miss any questions that you have. We actually had a couple of questions submitted in advance, and we'll be addressing those to the panel tonight. We'll also send an email to everyone who registered for today's webinar with a link to the recording. I want to say a special thank you to our dedicated steering committee of folks who have helped us to plan and execute this entire project. I also want to send a sincere thank you to our generous funders, the Reverend Nancy J. Farrell, and the Rochester Area Community Foundation. I'm excited now to introduce Norma Holland as this evening's moderator. Norma is best known in the local community as a longtime anchor and reporter at the Rochester, New York ABC affiliate, 13 Wham. It was in her years as a reporter and anchor that she built a reputation as an expert journalist and trusted advocate for all segments of the local community. Norma has also served for multiple years as a Causewave board member and has been a key member of Causewave's Race and Media Steering Committee, helping make things like today's webinar possible. Norma is currently the Director of Public Relations and Engagement for the Office of Equity and Inclusion at the University of Rochester School of Medicine and Dentistry. Thank you so much for all you do for the community, Norma, and for being our moderator today. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Todd. It is an honor to be here with all of you this evening and to introduce our esteemed panel of folks who we're going to be getting a chance to hear from tonight from all over our community. So I want to begin with the first person is Julio Saenz. He is a director of Common Ground Health. Saenz has more than 25 years of experience in journalism, public relations, marketing, and organizational leadership. He previously served as the manager of corporate communications for New York at Avangrid. And before that, he served as Chief Communications Officer and Development Officer at the Ibero-American Action League. He is a born entrepreneur who started his own bilingual newspaper in 2003. The newspaper, Conexión, did so well that 2 years later it was purchased by Gannett to be part of the Democrat and Chronicle. I had the pleasure of meeting Julio many years ago when I worked at 13 WHAM, and we've been friends ever since all those years ago. So I'm happy to turn things over to him and to allow him to present his presentation for all of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. Happy to be here. Thank you all for coming tonight. I'm really encouraged by how many folks came today to hear about this important topic. And I'm just going to share a couple of examples of some of the partnerships that I've worked on over the years that have been successful, and from those pull a couple of quick lessons in the few minutes I have here at the beginning. So first of all, if we could move on to the next slide, partnerships are so important in the media, and I think I came into working as a reporter, as a journalist, while it was still in its heyday in print, and before the transition to digital, and the level of engagement with the community wasn't always where it needed to be. Now, part of that is the old adage, well, and in some cases the rules around keeping people at arm's length. And I always felt like that was a big barrier, because that doesn't necessarily mean that you are ruining your credibility by at least establishing relationships with people in the community. And so, as Norma mentioned, I had a newspaper that I started called WXXI, and we did so well, it became part of the DNC. And one of the things that I did there to try to expand readership and get the publication out and build our network was I've always looked for win-win situations, and I think that's one of the key things with building partnerships and engagement, is to be authentic and see how you can be helpful. We were talking earlier before we started about making friends before you need them. That's one of the principles I live by, and part of that is to try to find win-win situations. Especially in communities of color or other communities where maybe as members of the media, we haven't had the best track record. So I'll share a short or quick partnership with WXXI. One of the ways we were able to get the paper out and get it ingrained in the community so quickly was I worked out a partnership with all the local churches. I was talked to people, went to one church, they told me who the other ones were, found people I knew at all of them, and eventually got them all to agree to be part of this religious directory that we had in the paper, and it listed all the times they had service, their contact information, their website, all their information. And in exchange for that publicity, they all agreed to distribute the publication in their churches, which was a great way to reach the community, because a lot of Latinos don't live in just one neighborhood anymore, but they do come back to their houses of worship for service on the weekends, regardless of if they live in Pittsburgh or Henrietta or anywhere else. At least many of them will still come back to those churches. So it became a great point of distribution for the publication. And we also gave them, free ads to publicize like their major events throughout the year. Can we move to the next slide, please? And so I always kept that success in my mind, that idea of trying to create win-win situations. And my next job, I was recruited to go run Excelsior, which was the Orange County Register's, or is the Orange County Register's Spanish language newspaper in LA. And we had a really difficult time with readership, because there was the paper from the LA Times, which was a huge competitor and had been around much longer. And so I was trying to find what could be our niche, where could we expand our readership. And so I got this idea, next slide, please, of while watching the Olympics, that, if NBC can have this exclusive agreement with the Olympics to cover the games, and there's this great relationship between them, why couldn't we do a similar thing on a smaller scale? And so next slide, I actually started seeing how popular the local adult soccer leagues for women, adults, kids, all the soccer leagues in the Latino community there. And I started to talk to them and seeing if we could work out some agreements where we would give them like their own space. It's not that we wouldn't cover a scandal if they were accused of stealing somebody's money, but at least in the sports pages, and not that that happened, and it didn't, thank God. But just what if we gave them pages in their own section in the paper, just as the NBA would have its own section, or the NFL. And we were able to start. I was able to start building those partnerships with some of these leagues, and these leagues have 4,000, 5,000, 8,000 players per league. And so these, these are some of the ads we started running. Hey, saying, "Hey, we make you famous." That's what the ad says in Spanish, and it says that we support local football and we support our people. Next slide. And so this turned into like a great. Funny enough, a few places didn't say no. One of the few places that said yes, one of the first places to say yes was a women's soccer league. And here's an example of one of the weekly articles we would do with the standings, with the results, with the highlighting certain players. This person, this young lady was leading the league in scoring. Next slide. And then, here you can see how robust the sections were where each league got its own space and its scores and its highlights and covering its championships. Next slide. And then we also brought in our partnerships that we had with MLS and the LA Galaxy and at the time Chivas USA, but the two MLS teams in LA, and put all that together. And so they were happy too, because we had all this audience exposed that they could expose and share info on the soccer games and bring soccer players for clinics. Next slide. And like I say, we also ran ads for them. And so it was a great partnership, and it actually grew our readership 71% to almost 200,000. And it was really the basis of it. Our subscriptions grew from like maybe 4,500 to about over 65,000. So what we would do is we would include a subscription to the paper in their membership, or the dues that they would play in the league. So it was a win-win tremendously. Last thing I wanted to say, and these are just more slides of what the coverage we gave them. Next slide, please. And then just one of the last things, a couple of key takeaways, is this whole idea of making friends before you need them. This whole arm length policy, I know that sometimes gets in the way, but a lot of cultures are more high context, and you have to have had coffee with some people a couple times before they'll start talking to you and sharing information with you. And then one last thing I wanted to say is, be careful of focusing on just a couple of people. And that's why I have the photo of the bust of Caesar there, because when I got to LA, somebody handed me the Caesar list. Now, here are all the people you need to know. And sure, they're the important people, just like you would if you were covering any beat. If you were a business reporter, sure, you'd want to know about Golisano and major business leaders, but don't forget to drill down deeper, which is sometimes what I see when media covers certain communities of color or other niche communities, where it's just, you always go back to the same source over and over again. And the community notices that, and it shows it to not be as authentic and a bit of a shallow relationship. So we come back to some of these other points. Thank you.
That's a great point, Julio, and I hope we do get to that, because I think that sometimes news organizations think that communities of colors or those who are marginalized think as a group, right? Like we only have one opinion on a topic, when we can have many different opinions on a topic, right? We're not, we don't all think the same way. Thank you so much, Julio. I appreciate that. Next up, we have Susan Rogers, the Executive Vice President and General Manager of WXXI Public Broadcasting. Susan was instrumental in leading WXXI through its digital transition, which now allows WXXI to meet the needs of a wider and more diverse audience. She also played a critical role in securing a broadcast partnership with the University of Rochester and WRUR, as well as Hobart and William Smith colleges, and WEOS WITH, which has extended the reach of WXXI's radio services. She has assisted with the station's long-term affiliation agreement with a Little Theater to further develop WXXI's public service on air, online, on stage, and on screen, and with the theater's conversion to digital cinema projection. And I know that you'll be presenting as well. Are you presenting separately from Mona? Okay, excellent. And I want to bring in another person who you just have to meet, is Mona Isler. She is the Executive Office Administrator at WXXI Broadcast. She supports the President and CEO, Executive Vice President, and General Manager on the Board of Trustees. Mona is everyone's friend, that is for sure. She's the Project Manager for WXXI's DEI Council and convenes their Health and Wellness Committee. She recently served as the Board Secretary and Chair of the Governance Committee of the Interdenominational Health Ministry Coalition. The coalition assists faith organizations in developing, sustaining, and growing health ministries to help mitigate health disparities in communities of color. Mona is the mother of 2 adult children, and best of all, she is Eisen's doting Grammy. She enjoys doing improv. Yes, she is that funny at baking and traveling. So Mona and Susan, I leave the floor to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Norma. We appreciate it. To everyone on, I hope I don't really need to introduce what we are and who we are at WXXI. We have grown over the years to try to be a major part of this community, and it is our mission to be the essential public media resource that informs, educates, engages, and inspires, strengthens our community. That is our mission. It is our vision that we provide highly valuable and accessible services to enrich our community. These are the arrays of services, and I hope at least one of them may have touched your life over the years. Next slide, please. Our strategy map, our direction is, as you notice, has the community at the center. And as part of that, we have made a commitment clearly and definitively to diversity and inclusivity that is reflected fully in our staff and leadership, content development, and the community engagement that helps us serve everyone in this community. And I hope that you feel that when you see what we're trying to do. But today we're going to talk about some of the strategies we use to get there. Next slide, please. These are the ways, the sort of basic ways we engage our audience and community. We do a lot of outreach work. We have targeted events to reach children at festivals. We go out to every place we can in the community. We are free and over the air. I say we're like water. Well, we're lucky to live in a place where there's lots of water. Let me say that. We are like water, but we also know people might not know that we're available for free to them. So we know we need to go out. We use partnership, as Julio talked about. Same thing. We know that we aren't educators, but we work with educators to improve their ability to reach people. Our movies and documentary screenings, we include talkbacks, we include opportunities for people to discuss the issues. We have our magazine launches and best of events. We do supporter thankathons where we bring people into the station to call people just to thank them from being part of our community, and do events with donor engagement so that we keep people close to us and listen to them as best we can. We have an active volunteer corps with 92 current volunteers. And long-term, since the beginning of the station, as set up by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, we have a community advisory board that aimed to be representative of our community and operates alongside our governance board and all the staff and people who work here to make sure that we are touching our community. Next slide, please. This is our current community advisory board, and I will tell you they represent many different abilities, many different backgrounds: the LGBTQIA community, plus community, the Black community, Hispanic community, and mostly just the people who live here. They range in age from 24 to 87. We are looking to be sure that we are connecting to, listening to, and being involved with people. So we're not just sending things out to people, but they feel like we're inviting them in. And we've developed this year some additional ways to try to really become closer to that community. And Mona's going to talk more about that, our new stakeholder events.
So one of the ways that we do more one-on-one engagement, next slide, please, are what are called stakeholder conversations, stakeholder discussions, stakeholder meetings. The very first one started back in the fall of 2020 when we were creating our DEI Council, our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council, in the wake of all of the racial awakening that was happening in 2020. And we said, we can't do this without talking to our community, it would be disingenuous of us to do anything in terms of trying to be an anti-racist organization and do the work that we need to do without speaking to people in our community. So we curated a small, diverse group of influential members of the community, people that you would not expect. They weren't always, it wasn't a mayor or a politician or anything, but these were people who we knew in the community had influence and had voice, and asked them to come and talk to us. We had some conversations with them around our role as a media organization, but also as an employer here and as people, about what we need to do. And we sent them the charge, the things that we wanted to do, and the discussion questions in advance. And we sat and had to be prepared for open, honest feedback. We asked some real serious questions, and we had to be prepared for the honest answers. Danielle Ponder said, radical honesty is a form of love. So everyone was very, very honest. And so when you're creating these opportunities to talk with people, to sit down one-on-one, 5-on-1, it doesn't matter the size of your stakeholder meeting, be prepared to hear what they have to say, act on the suggestions that they give you, follow up, and then share the takeaways with whoever the stakeholders are internally with you. Next slide, please. These are some of the really tough questions that we asked and got some really honest answers, because a lot of us are very insular in the way that we perceive ourselves, and is not always the way that other people perceive you. So we did ask some really tough, how do you perceive us, and where do we fall short, and what are ways in which we can improve, and who can help us get where we want to go? So that's the purpose of the stakeholder conversation. That was the very first one. And next slide. We did another one very recently with City Magazine. We were working on a digital transformation project in terms of enhancing city's newsletter and calendar. And so we did the same thing. We curated a list of influential art stakeholders who were diverse, and we asked them to talk to us about ways in which, how is city, you can go to the next slide, how what is your general perception of city, and how are we representing diverse communities? What can we do more to elevate the voices of art stakeholders of color and of all stripes in every way that which art happens in our community? And so one of the things that came from that, they said that we need to have more opportunities to get together. So next slide. We from that was born an arts mixer. So we took the suggestions from this community, and we created an opportunity to bring together arts creators, arts funders, arts lovers in a space where they could just sit and talk and get to know each other. And they found that to be a valuable exercise, so that they could then create community amongst themselves as well, because they said our job is to convene, that's our responsibility. And so that's the thing that we've been trying to do. Next slide, please. We also used it as an opportunity to ask them some questions about how they use our services, and what better ways we could perform, so that, you know, we've done that. So we were asked to create a document to help other stations, because this is a station system-wide thing among television stations, PBS, how to create these opportunities. And so we put together a working document to help other stations to do the same thing in their communities.
There's one more slide.
Next slide. That's it, same thing. So these are just other questions, other opportunities that we had to get together. So I think that's about it.
That's awesome, Mona. I love that. And it's great to see in your slides there some wonderful people that, you know, that are, it just goes to show you how many wonderful people we have in our city who are so dedicated to the arts. And, you know, the more I learn about the arts in Rochester, the more I realize we really have some monster talent here, you know, so awesome. I love this. Thank you so much, both of you, Susan and Mona. We appreciate it. And now I want to introduce our last but not least, our final presenter of the evening. Our final panelist is Robert Bell. Rob Bell. He is a writer, photographer, and filmmaker, and a reporter at the Democrat and Chronicle, covering city government, among other things. He was born in Rochester, New York. He grew up in Philadelphia, and he studied film in LA. After years of freelance photography, videography, and blogging for online media outlets, Rob has been able to fuse writing, photography, and video into comprehensive multimedia journalism that now serves Rochester's communities. And we are so honored to have you here, Rob, to hear from you about what you're working with. You said the magic word I read was video. I love it, and I cannot wait to see what you have for us tonight.
Yeah, we just start out playing this video, and then I kind of explain.
Kids nowadays, they listen to something somebody saying music. You could tell them the right thing to do, and they hear music or they see the games they play and different stuff like that, and that's a bigger influence on them, even though you could be in their life every day. So you kind of gotta like lead by example.
And I could tell my sons, I could tell my kids to, you know, this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you do it right, you know, follow these directions, boom, 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 you know, while they're within my control. But the minute they walk out the door, whether to go to school, go to the park, go shopping with their friends or family or whatever the case is, you know, I have my access to them is limited. So now they're exposed to the world, and all I can do is just hope and pray that they continue to hold on to what I taught them and what I'm trying to influence them to do, you know, to keep them on the right track versus, you know, what they see and hear, you know, out in the city.
You got people stealing cars, you got people robbing people selling drugs and everything like that. And you, as a father, I feel like, and the rest of these guys probably be the same thing, we got to be the positive role models and the positive influence for those kids, because, you know, without that, I think they're going to stray away.
Experience is your best teacher. So, like, you can say what you want to say to your kids, they're still going to do what they want to do. Me, I just try to make sure that I'm inside my kids' life, and whatever path they take, I can try to lead them to the right way of doing the right thing instead of the wrong thing. But it's hard nowadays because, like you said, we don't have no morals, no value. We don't understand loyalty. People don't know what love is because there's so much fake love outside. So it's kind of hard to steer your kids in the right direction when the direction is all over the place.
The challenge is allowing your kid to be a kid. I think that's the biggest hurdle parents face nowadays. Is there's so much access to information and things that grow your child up way before, you know what I mean, you know, it's time, or we think back or reflect on our days as youth and how most of us probably had to grow up way ahead of time, you know what I mean? The things we got exposed to, the things we saw, the things that we, you know, want to ideally shield our children from are the things that, you know, they don't have to experience it the same way we did. It's right at their fingertips.
In today's times, it's hard, you know what I mean? Because, like, we have no values. Like, we got no morals nowadays. And even when you try to instill them, it's not, because you tell them this, we in this house, and we tell you this is how you're supposed to live, but then it's this big world that says otherwise, you know what I mean? So, I don't know, it'd be kind of hard.
Thanks for showing that. So that was part of a package that we're putting together at the Democrat and Chronicle on barbershops. And the reason why I wanted to play it is because that is journalism, right? It might not be 1,000 words in a photo, but it is centering the voices of people in the community who these topics affect the most. This specific project came out of me doing reporting in the community and hearing the common theme of where are the parents, especially when it comes to issues of some of these car thefts and things going on with our youth. So I decided to get together parents in the barbershop to have a discussion about it. And the reason why I think it's important is because you really never get to see Black men in that element, especially 5 Black men talking about fatherhood, being vulnerable, talking about things that they fear. And the barbershop has historically been a place where it's kind of like the news in certain communities. You know, if you want to know what's going on, go to a barbershop inside a community, spend 30 minutes, and you'll find out the lay of the land. So the story of the Democrat and Chronicle's initiatives with engaging the community is really kind of my story as well as parallel themes. So I grew up in Philadelphia, rough, gritty, unapologetic city. And unfortunately, a lot of the people I grew up around in those communities don't really trust the news. And that comes from years of reporters only coming into the neighborhood to talk about crime or poverty, or only when there's a murder, or only when there's something painful happening. And there's so many other stories that occur in these neighborhoods. That's why I didn't want to be a journalist and go into news. And I wanted to tell stories through documentary filmmaking. That was my academic track. But I found my way back here to Rochester in 2020, photographing the demonstration after the They Improved News, and had a conversation with our executive editor, Michael Killian, who outlined this vision of kind of trying to make up for some of that harm done, and allowing me the opportunity to come from outside of journalism to use some of my filmmaking skills to kind of re-envision what journalism can be. And I think what we've learned is not only do you have to engage the community, but to get people to engage with the content that you create, you got to be creative. It's got to be more than just, again, 1,000 words on a photo. So the opportunity to do short documentaries, which I've done several at the DNC, to do a podcast like I did over the summer, linking the themes of climate change and rising violence. And then this video with the Barbershop Project. Two other projects I wanted to mention was the Avenue Black Box Theater that we have a partnership with. We did a barbecue and an artist showcase on Joseph Avenue. And then a series we did on Black businesses in the 19th Ward, where a lot of those restaurants I still go to now to get food and things like that. So I'll bring this full circle by, saying a story that I worked on early at the DNC, a young man named Anthony Miller, who was incarcerated for 7 years for a crime he didn't do. And we felt like it was important to tell his story, but he didn't trust the media because they flashed his mugshot all over the place when it first happened, and nobody really came back around to right that wrong. So he didn't want to talk to us. And initially he declined the story. And then on the Saturday, I got a phone call from him saying that he was finally comfortable doing it and that he wanted to do it. And that the reason that he wanted to do it is because his barber is one of the barbers in that video in the beginning. So he was able to vouch for me. And I think that's an example of how being in the community and building those connections is not only important for trust, but for the actual work. To get work done is very important to build those connections. So that's my time, and thanks for having me here.
I really appreciate that, Rob. You so much, if not everything you said, resonates with me. And I have to say that trust is key, right? When you're building relationships with communities in which you want to engage, you got to build that trust, right? And it can't be, just when you need them for a story. It has to come well before then. That's the community building aspect of it, right? And but yeah, I mean, obviously your reputation was out there in the community, and he knew about you, right? He heard about you. Obviously you had someone who could vouch for you. So thank you for sharing that. And the video is great. I mean, hearing those fathers speak, it's like, which one of us who is a parent hasn't thought all of those things, right? So I want to bring our panelists together now to join in the conversation. And again, if you're watching and you would like to ask a question, by all means, you can put it in the Q&A. We want to hear from you. We really appreciate that you're joining us tonight to stay with us. And so why don't I start with, look, I was a reporter, right? In some ways, I still feel like one, right? Like sometimes when you're reporting, it can feel transactional, okay? You go into a neighborhood, you want to get the story, you want people to talk to you. And so we know, though, that authentic community engagement, can yield you the story. I mean, Rob, you got the story, right? Because somebody knew you and could vouch for you. But there's other benefits that come from that engagement with the community. Can you talk about, and this is a question to all of you, what are the benefits on both sides, right, for going into a community and building community with them, right, before there's a problem, before there's a story that you want to hear from people about? What are the benefits of going in and doing that ahead of time? And this is to all of you.
I'll start. It doesn't matter if you're a reporter, a hospital, a church. Relationship building is key to everything that we do. The benefits for the community is that they finally have someone who can tell their stories, elevate them, and elevate things that are happening in the community that are not always negative. It is about building trust. And if you can, that's the benefit for the other side, for the media, is to be able to have someone say, I trust this person, this organization, this entity, that when I share the intimate parts of myself, my street, my neighborhood, my barrio, whatever it is, that I know that they're going to care, they're going to take care of that on my behalf. So relationship building up front, you can't just come in and have that. You got to show up. And that's just straight the key. You just have to show up without wanting anything, no ulterior motives. If you're having a festival, I'm going to be there. If you're having a block party, we're going to show up and we're going to be present. We might hand out something. It doesn't matter. It is about building relationships so that when you see me, you understand that I'm here just because we're in community together.
I love that. Any others? Any other thoughts, Rob?
I think it just breaks barriers. You know, I think about the times I've spent on Jefferson Avenue and reporting, and sometimes I read comments online like, you're crazy for walking up and down that street. And it's because of the perception that anytime you hear about Jefferson Avenue, it's crime, right? But there are people that live there, and there are businesses that operate there. There's a great candy store that, you know, I want to take my daughter to, you know, at some point. So, you know, I think when you do the work and you build the relationships, it breaks the stigmas and the stereotypes and really the barriers to, you know, we have a more healthy, just community, and we aren't so segregated and in our silos, and certain parts of the city aren't seen as dark and scary all the time, in places where there are people that are just like you, like you said with the video, parents that feel the same way that we all feel. So I just think it breaks a lot of barriers when you do that work.
So it humanizes people.
For sure.
I think we're good at dehumanizing people, I think, because we boil them down to their political affiliation, to their skin color, or to our perceptions and, you know, misperceptions. We don't give them a chance to just be human and have a human moment. Like you were having a human moment with them, right? And when you meet those folks who come to your events at WXXI, you know, you're having a human moment.
Yeah, and I think in some ways for us, as we tend to, you know, we need to deal with serious issues. We need to deal with things that are hurting this community. We need to deal with the ways we heal and the ways we move things forward. But the opportunity to approach it before there's a crisis, as we talked about your food, about sports, as Julio was talking about the things that we that help bring us, make us curious about our differences instead of make us afraid of our differences. And that, I think, is something that we must do more often. We can't just be talking about bad news. We can't just be talking about crises. We've got to be talking about we've got to be in the life community, the lifeblood of this community, or else why would they pay attention to us when there's a problem?
Yeah, I love that. And how can you tell a full story about a community if you only know one side of it, one aspect of it, right? And so, and Julio, I love what you said about, you know, doing the reports on the sports, making them famous, right? Like, yeah, it's a big deal when you see yourself on TV or, you know, in a video or in the paper. Like, it's a big deal. And yeah, so, you know, you scratch that little itch, right? Like, everyone wants to be that 15 minutes of fame or 15 whatever. Now it's 15 seconds. But the point is that also, you know, you delight people, right? And that's also part of what this is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's not just that one person, it's 20 of their relatives and 20 of their friends. And it's not just that one person. You're actually impacting and creating a bit of a bond with countless people when you do those things.
Yeah. You know, I will be honest with you. There were times as a reporter when I went into a community, and if they happened to be Latino and I spoke Spanish to them, that instantly brought down the level of fear and suspicion on the part of the people I was interviewing. So what are some of the barriers you see to connecting with communities, you know, when your staff might not look like them or even, you know, speak their language necessarily in more ways than one, right? So what are some of those barriers, and what is the benefit of then having a very diverse staff who can go out and literally speak the language of the people that they're interviewing?
Well, I think it's really important, and we have to, I mean, we're providing training as best we can. But I also think at times, I don't want any of my staff who, oh, I'm the one who goes because. I want to make sure that the people who go are the people, every one of our reporters may need to be reporting on something they don't know about. But they also represent the audience. They represent the community saying, what don't I know about this? How do I find out about it? They become that curious other community member, and not trying to say, I know you, I don't know you, but I want to know more about you.
Absolutely, and getting to know people that can open doors for you. And that goes back to that Caesar list I mentioned. You know, when you do need to talk to someone in the Latino community, and you're not Latino, you don't have a contact. But I mean, you at least maybe know someone like me or like Daisy Rivera, who anyone in town knows. When someone calls me and says, you don't know me, but Daisy referred me to you, then that's it. It's done. Like, I'm going to take care of that person because Daisy's vouching for them. She knows them. And it goes out. It really does work that way. It is, who you know is everything. But it's even more so in some other cultures where there's some mistrust. Okay. So without that trust, you even more so need that connection.
Mm-hmm.
And you can build that trust even if you're not the same, even if you're not the same race or the same, I'm going to use Patty Singer as an example just because
she's a great example.
Ooh, wow. Patty Singer wrote the book on this topic.
So deeply embedded in relationship building in the community that her voice is so trusted because she was always there. We were doing our walking group at church. She came and interviewed us while we were doing a walk. It's just that always bringing what was important to you to the forefront of the rest of the community. You don't necessarily need to be the same color to do that, but you do have to build trust. You have to invest in relationships in order to do that. And if you try to go in cold, you're not going to get the same result. You're not going to get the flavor of the story because people are going to be masked when they're talking to you. But when you have relationship, people show you their true, authentic selves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think it's something to spending time in the city of the community that you're reporting in.
Oh yeah.
When you're not working.
Yes.
Some of my best sources have come from me just being out, going to an art gallery, bumping into a person, having a conversation, and then I got a story out of that. So I don't think that journalists can afford to sit behind the screen and just report from what they see, on social media or from what they hear. I really do think that it is important for people to see you out doing things.
And that is one of the hard things as newsrooms have gotten smaller, because people are stretched thin, and that time to go to the barbershop or go have a cup of coffee or go to the church walk becomes really high value and really hard, but it's so important.
Yeah, I will say one of the things that, and Rob and Susan, you said this so succinctly, when I was reporting, I remember emceeing events on the weekends, or, on my time off, for nonprofits or small organizations or churches or you name it, right? And I wasn't being paid for any of that. I wasn't being compensated for any of that. I was off time, off hours, right? But I did it because it was sort of expected of us at the newsroom. It was like, we saw all the news anchors doing it. So all the reporters were like, oh, I guess I should do the same. And it was actually the best thing ever. It was an investment in the community, in the communities that I was reporting on before I needed to go in there with a camera and a microphone. And so they got to know me as a human being, and I got to know them likewise. And so then, like, Julio said, when I needed to speak to someone in a particular community, I'm like, oh yeah, I met that person at that opening or at that thing. And so, it was really very valuable. And so I want to ask this question, because this is really vital. It's a reality of our times. Newsrooms are smaller. Okay. You've got smaller staff. You've got, in some cases, younger staff who are not as, is experienced, and they need that mentorship from the older, more experienced folks. I won't say older,
Seasoned.
veteran reporters, and because I was one of the old people when I left the newsroom. So that's okay. That's all right. I earned my grays. Okay. I earned them. But what would be the one piece of advice you would offer up to a newsroom looking to make progress in this area? Okay. And you've given some really sage advice this evening. But, we know that the smaller newsrooms, right? More news to cover in some cases. What is the takeaway for people who are watching or will be watching this recording later on? And I want to go, anyone can jump in.
Well, I would say from managing a newsroom, I would say make it a requirement. If at all possible. I know there's not enough time and hours in the day, and budgets are tight, but I would almost make it a requirement. Like twice a month, you need to have gone out with the lead or gone to at least 2 community events, or and that is a reporter just to be able to observe and be seen and meet people and make connections. So if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. I would, at least from a leadership standpoint, make it a requirement.
It's a great point.
People love food and people love music. So if you can, I've seen the value in us doing events where we bring a lot of people together, and then the number of resources and people you can meet from those events, just that 4-hour barbecue led to probably 10-15 stories, 7-8 sources. So, there's value in breaking bread with a community. So I'm always a big advocate of, let's do a barbecue, or let's get a party together, have some food, and just enjoy space with the community. And I think that's a way to get the newsroom involved or something.
Yeah.
And then kind of check off a lot of boxes at the same time, because we are shrinking, and newsrooms are losing reporters. So you got to get creative in how you do outreach.
Yeah, and I think that the last few years with the pandemic, it was especially hard. I think people were inside, they were in a bubble, and having those big events. We used to have an open house every year, and literally thousands of people would come to the station. And
wow.
Meet Elmo, or, tour the newsroom, talk to Evan Dawson, talk to Noel Evans. It was some people freaking hated it. I gotta be honest. Because it was like, it was crazy. It was just, we're an office building. We're not made for that. But it was such a great opportunity. First of all, especially when you're broadcasters, you don't see your public.
Yes, that's
so
true.
Directly. You can, you got hundreds, thousands of people listening to your voice,
True.
but you don't see them.
True.
And I think that just having people come in and get the sense of the breadth of our audience was so good for people. And so I'm going to bring it back, because the pandemic sort of killed it, but it's
I got to agree with you. I remember tours through the newsroom.
Yeah.
And little kids, senior citizens from the city to the suburbs, they had walked in on our noon show, and it was like the lights and the thing, and they, you know, and how
Yeah,
many
you set up the green
Yeah.
screen and let them like play around with it, and
And how
yeah.
many people wanted to shadow the reporters? You know, we got a chance. Some of them got a chance to do that. Yeah. Okay. But
And
I'm sorry.
inevitably, somebody would come in thinking it's a TV station and learn that we're a radio station. And what? I mean, it was, and see, the other small thing I would add is that a lot of the relationships I built through here were volunteering. Volunteer opportunities that have been presented to us here at the station. Luckily, I mean, kids, we do a lot of volunteer things in the community with children. So that's where I invest my volunteer time. Is I'm going to show up at the public market for the city of Rochester's Halloween thing and hand out things to small children dressed as Hamilton, and we're going to have a sing off. But it is also a way to put yourself out there, to be in the community, but you're also getting something back. It also does impact you personally when you're able to volunteer and spend time with the community and just get to meet people in general. It's an amazing thing. It does wonders for you personally.
I think it's very rewarding for the staff when they are able to actually in person meet the person that they've been speaking with, and whether it's a small child who watches this on TV or listen or just enjoys the music, and you know, we would bring we have partners a lot, involve our partners, like the RPO would bring their petting zoo, and Hochstein would bring something, you know, we just make it a really active, engaging experience for people. And I agree with you, Rob. Food, always good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. You know, I saw Julio, we saw each other at an event not long ago, and we were talking, and I was asking, you know, how's it going? How's it, you know, and I kind of joked with you that I, you know, since COVID began, I've stayed out. I've not gone to events because I was afraid of getting COVID, but also, you know, and I kind of became a bit of I came a little antisocial, like you know, and I'm like forcing myself to get out into the world again. And you said to me how good it felt to be out with people. Right. Yeah. And that you were even trying to get out more often in at events, right? Live events. And because that contact is essential, right?
It is. And it happened to all of us. I'm one of the most social people you will ever meet in the world. I've always been, and even I have been, got in the habit of staying home and not going out. And then it's just easier to stay home, and you have to make the effort. Those of you who are starting out, maybe don't have the time, make time on your own. If you have to get out and meet people, you have to make those connections to everything.
We have a question that just came in from David Grome. Social media content from businesses and organizations comprise a lot of contemporary media consumption. What kind of content and stories are missing from this growing arena? It often feels like these channels only acknowledge diversity around holidays like MLK Day, Black History Month, and Juneteenth. How else and where else would you encourage these companies and organizations to use social media to build relationships, earn trust, and contribute to community year-round with more authenticity? This is for anyone. Again, social media, yeah.
I would say that you could build partnerships with organizations. You still have a really strong platform, and you could try to work something out where people send you content, since you do have reduced news staffs and not enough time. That pick some organizations, diverse organizations, to keep you up to date and agree to send you pictures and maybe even video from their events that you can share on your social media and spread it out throughout the year.
So user-generated content almost, right? Like,
yes, exactly. Yeah, crowdsourcing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I just think we have to demonstrate it too. We just need to do it ourselves. I mean, it needs to be in the media every day, not just on certain days. Rob, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I think one thing we discovered at the DNC is that we needed a social media reporter specifically to do that, because it's too much to ask a reporter in the field to worry about both. I think that people think that it's an easy kind of thing. Well, just put together a post while you're there. But the good social media content is very focused, detailed. I don't know if you ever tried to put together a reel. It's not the easiest thing in the world.
That is hard.
These teenagers got it down pat, so maybe
they make it look easy, but it's not easy.
But it's not easy. So I do think that more newsrooms need to come to terms with, you might need a person specifically to focus on that and bring that energy and think about different ways to not only create stories specifically for social media, but adapt print stories to social media. How can we take this information and make it something that will work on social media?
I agree. Yeah.
I think it's hard for all of us, as you pointed out, Rob. We need to go where people are, even if we're not comfortable with that platform, that the Instagram or the TikTok, or if that's where audiences are, we need to find a way to get important information to them. And that's a lot of work, but I think it's important.
I'm gonna do something my producer would have hated that I did. Is I'm gonna stretch. I want us to go a little longer here. I want to answer this question from the audience. Dave Kasnoff, what are the next steps media can take in terms of reaching out to underserved constituencies, people with disabilities, Native Americans, European and South American refugees, and older citizens?
Go where they are.
Go where they are.
Find out what's important to them. Go where they are and talk to them. Listen. Not talk, listen.
And let me just say, in our work with inclusion for disabilities, our motto is nothing about us without us. So that you need to have the people who are living those parts of their lives or experiencing those things. They need to be part of the reporting. Their voices need to be heard. Their experiences need to be reflected. Not you've washed it out and rewritten it and ironed it up and put it up there, but you've actually helped experience it with them so that others can experience it.
And I think they need to be thought of when it's just not about
Right.
don't
something happening.
Yeah,
Right.
don't reach out to a person who has a disability just for a story about disability.
Right.
Normalize it.
Yeah, it's just as important to hear that voice for a story about city government.
Exactly.
And it doesn't have to be
or housing, or
Yeah.
whatever the story is. Absolutely.
You don't have to
Or
that they have a disability. It's just that their voice is just as important.
And I was going to say, and actually kind of ties into the last question, is Black history is history. Brown stories are stories. And it's about elevating humanity. It is, like you said at the very, very beginning, it is about humanizing people. Their stories, there are a million stories to be told. Tell some.
I love it. I love it. This has been the most amazing panel. I mean, you all came with some great stories. All of you had great ideas and great points to be made. I think we have to have humility when we go into places that we don't feel that we know anything about. Humility, curiosity, respect. So thank you so much for all of your time. And I'm going to pass the baton over to Todd Butler.
Well, thanks, Norma, and everybody. I want everybody to keep their cameras on so that when I say nice things about you, you can I can see your smiling faces, because I just want to say thanks so much to all of you for your participation in this webcast today, and I hope that our audience has enjoyed it and gotten something out of it as well. I just want to mention a couple of the key takeaways that I've got. Julio's quote about you need to make a friend before you need a friend, I think is a great takeaway from this, and a really important point, and something we all probably ought to have hanging on our wall. I think, Mona and Susan talked about asking for feedback in many places and in many ways. And I always love when Danielle Ponder's name comes up, and Mona gave a quote from her, the idea of radical honesty being an act of love. Rob talked about the importance of centering the voice of the people most affected by a story. If we want to talk about fatherhood, we can put out a story with a bunch of statistics, or we can actually talk to the people who are most affected by it and center their voice, like he did in that video that he shared from the barbershop. I think, Mona talked about being in the life of the community, or they won't care about talking to us when there's a problem. I think that's a really important message. And Rob talked about spending time in the community you're covering when you aren't working as being a really important piece of this. So, and I think the idea that organizations can support that as well, I think is a really important piece too, as opposed to just assuming that people are going to be able to have the freedom when they're not working to do that. Actually making that part of the job description and giving people the working time to do it as well, I think is something that is a good takeaway for us. So I want to say a huge thank you to Julio, to Susan, to Mona and Rob, and of course to our wonderful MC, our wonderful moderator, Norma Holland. We have one more Shaping Our Stories webcast coming up this winter on the topic of media as a force for good, so you won't want to miss that one. You will all receive a link for tonight's recording. I want to say thanks one last time to our funders, the Reverend Nancy J. Farrell and the Rochester Area Community Foundation, and thanks to all of you for attending and for being a force for good in media and in the community where you live. Thanks, everyone, and have a great night.